expected.
Today we're going to be talking about the Russian Winchester 1895. Now, the history of this gun is a very unique one and a very cool one. Lever actions had been a very popular style of rifle in the United States in the 1800s. They were used heavily by the U.S. Cavalry, the U.S. Army, even in the Wild West. The lever action was a very popular rifle. As you can see, it's a little complicated and has quite a few moving parts. So it was later phased out by more modern designs like bolt actions or semi-auto self-loading designs. In World War I, a particular nation, the Russian Empire, was very, very critically short of weapons, and the United States was one of the largest producing nations at the time. So the Russians actually came to Winchester to seek out a military contract for some rifles of theirs, and they happened to choose the Winchester 1895, which after a few modifications, such as changing the caliber to 7.62 by 54R, the standard Russian caliber, as well as adding on some bolts to guide stripper clips for the specific ammo. So an interesting detail about the sights on the 1895 was that they were measured in arsons and not meters or feet, because in the Russian Empire, the standard form of measurement was called arsons, which was basically about a short person's stride, which is just a very interesting detail. So Russia put an official order of about 300,000 Winchester 1895s to be made and shipped to Russia during World War I. As you can see, the Russians put a proof stamp on the side of this receiver, basically saying that it was good for military use and was all ready to be shipped off to the front lines to be used in combat. Now, the Russians were very particular about what 1895s would be able to go onto the front lines. And some of these did not receive these stamps. They were out of spec or something was wrong with them. So the people looking at them decided to not approve them in the United States and not have them shipped over to Russia. So a lot of those just became commercial rifles that would just be sold in state. However, not all of these got to Russia. A few of the ships carrying them were sunk by German U-boats. So there's a few of these at the bottom of the ocean. But however, for the most part, a lot of them did make it to Russia. And they actually saw extensive use in World War I, specifically with a lot of Latvian and Lithuanian units. However, there is one thing I would like to point out. For a normal bolt-action rifle, there is not too many places for debris and dirt and things to get in the way of the function of the rifle. For example, you would open the action, load in your ammo, close your bolt, and continue firing the gun and cycling ammo. However, on a lever action, there are a lot of moving pieces and a lot of moving parts and a lot of exposed parts. So for example, let's say I'm in the trenches of World War I. I'm being charged by either Austrians or Germans, and I fire, and I go to the next round. And I'm in a trench around a lot of dirt, around a lot of stuff flying around from artillery. And I have a huge, almost clockwork-like mechanism open below me. Now, it is super easy for a bunch of debris and just stuff to get in there and gunk up and stick your action, and it would be very easy for this gun to malfunction just because of how much open stuff could be getting into the gun. However, there aren't too many stories about these failing, and clearly served really well, because it's always better to have something than nothing when you're being charged by a massive horde of other guys with guns. So it served its purpose well, and it's just very super cool. It was the last ever lever action to see major combat use, which just makes this a very cool and sweet treat to show you guys and to be able to shoot. However, as you can see, I had to put a towel in the action to get it to cycle and absolutely rip that thing to get the next round chambered. To my knowledge, that is a pretty common problem on over 100-year-old lever action guns. So just another thing that bolt action rifles have over lever actions, it is very easy to slap open a bolt rather than to pull down on a lever action. So unfortunately I didn't get too many videos of me shooting this thing just because of how annoying it was to have to turn off the camera and try and rip the action down. On most lever action designs, you have a tube that goes under the barrel where you will load your ammo into, and it will go up all the way to basically fill the tube. However, the Russian design, they wanted to take the standard Mosin-Nagant 54R clips and load them straight into the rifle. So for the 1895 design, they made a specific magazine inside the receiver where you could open the action and put the clip in and then push all the rounds into the receiver instead of having to load them and possibly cause a explosion in the chamber chamber where all the rounds are held. Because again, if you have a bunch of rounds that are tip to butt and you fire the gun and the recoil has the sharp point of a 54R round into the primer of another 54R round, that would cause them to explode. So the safest bet was to just have an internal magazine where you would load them in. You do lose quite a lot of ammo capacity. However, it is a lot safer to use, especially in a combat situation. The Russian 1895 is one of the most sought after and popular lever action designs, and specifically video games. One of my favorite, Battlefield 1, this is either a sniper or a infantry rifle, and it's very cool to have in real life. After being a child and playing Battlefield 1 for most of my life, it's very cool to have a real one in person and see it for myself. Very happy to have this thing to show you guys. So thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate you guys' time, and I will see y'all in the next one.